All right, we're live.
All right.
Hey, well, so we just had a big milestone. Ben, I mean, it's been something that you have been working on for quite a while. The milestone being obviously Espresso Systems is now running as a proof of stake consensus protocol. I
Yeah.
wonder if we're gonna spend some time talking about it. We have some partners that are going to be coming on and commemorating the moment. But I figured it would be a good idea to start with a little chat with you and talk about some of the some of like how we got here, how Espresso got here, and why this is all significant. So um, I think that to begin, I would love to know, just like since you have been working towards this kind of like for years, like what does the moment actually like mean to you, as a founder of obviously
Absolutely.
Systems being the original developer of the network, which now is its own thing, but
Right. So, of course, for me, the milestone of transitioning to proof of stake is one milestone that's just building on top of, the shoulders of prior milestones. And so, for me, the proof of stake aspect is one of many transitions in the maturing of the system that we're developing. The significance of Espresso Network is it's the first layer one that's truly optimized for layer two chains, and to be able to host thousands or even millions of independent blockchains that are all secured by a common consensus protocol. This is the only way to really reach millions of transactions per second in internet scale. Of course, the layer two paradigm began with Ethereum, but Ethereum wasn't really built for layer two chains. And it's quite difficult to take a system that is already running and has the job of maintaining its own set of applications. Ethereum already runs a copy of the virtual machine, and to optimize it to be able to truly hold the scale that we need to have internet-wide commerce happening on layer two shards on top of a common base layer. So Espresso began from the concept that we would just start from scratch and build a layer one that is totally optimized for layer two chains. And so we launched the network on a permission set of operators, so on 100 distributed validators across the world, just actually over a year ago. And so it's been running already in production, but of course that was just the start. And the transition to going from a fixed set of nodes running this new layer one base layer for layer twos to operating on a dynamic set of nodes where participation in the protocol is permissionless based on ownership of stake, ownership in this case of ESP tokens, is a huge milestone. It's quite challenging to go from a fixed operator set to a dynamic operator set in any new type of consensus protocol. That's always a challenge. But I would say it's one of many important upgrades that we're going to go through. We're also improving the latency of the system. We're heading towards sub-second transaction confirmations. We're heading towards 100 megabytes per second, ultimately, to be able to sustain the types of transaction per second throughput that we want to be able to achieve. So I will stress that it's really one milestone amidst a long list of milestones that we want to achieve.
yeah. And I think that it's worth noting too that Espresso is running a kind of a custom consensus protocol, right? A hotshot. It's not just we're not just a forking the Tendermint or anything like that. Why is it such a rare occurrence for new layer one blockchains to launch with their own kind of consensus protocols? Like that kind of stands out in recent memory.
Yeah, there's multiple reasons for this. So first of all, consensus protocols are always evolving, and even just in the last couple of years, there have been some major breakthroughs in terms of being able to reduce the latency of consensus protocols and be able to achieve faster finality. Research scientists at Espresso, including Dalia Malki and Kartik, have written a number of papers on this, Hot Stuff 2, Hot Stuff 1, and then most recently Hydrangea. And so developing our own consensus that we can maintain ourselves and keep up to date with all the latest innovations is one of the reasons of having our own consensus protocols as opposed to working off of an existing library. But there's another element of this too, which is that most consensus protocols are designed for this monolithic model of combining execution and consensus. And that is the layer one monolithic paradigm that most blockchains follow. And what we're following is the complete other paradigm, which is layer ones are not supposed to handle execution. The job of the consensus protocol is only to act as a database that any application can read from across the world and write to. And the job of consensus is only to ensure that the data that gets written is ordered consistently and everyone sees it in the same consistent order, and that the data that's written to the layer one is available. That's the only thing that layer two chains actually need from the layer one. We optimize the service that layer ones provide to layer twos in a way that no layer one that's handling its own execution can optimize for. And we do this at the consensus level. So for example, in Hotshot, our consensus protocol, which is ever evolving and absorbing the latest innovations coming out of other papers, such as most recently Hydrangea. One of the very important aspects of our consensus protocol is that the data gets split up into different pieces called erasure code shares and gets distributed across the network so that during the first round of consensus, not every node actually receives a full copy of the data. And so they don't actually need to execute transactions and validate transactions. They're only there to ensure that the data that gets written is preserved in a consistent way and that everyone agrees on it. So we are able to do things that other consensus protocols are not able to do as a result. And so that's why we built our own consensus protocol and have developed it over many years and are continuing to develop on top of it, even while it's also running in production to ensure that it achieves higher throughput, lower latency, and services layer twos in the best possible way.
Right. Yeah. I think the prevailing narrative was that, L2s were providing a service to Ethereum, right? And that service being, scaling.
Well, not to Ethereum, actually, right? They're providing a service to layer two chains broadly, just like Ethereum provides a service to layer two chains.
Yeah. No, I was saying that the previous narrative was that L2s were providing a service.
Yes.
Scaling Absolutely. For Ethereum, right? But it actually is reversed, right? It's actually, the L1 is what's providing the service, and Ethereum not built for that, whereas Espresso has been built for that, specifically. So, and what obviously you just talked about, Espresso is optimized for speed, right? We're not handling execution. You can't deploy a smart contract or launch a token on Espresso, right? We've actually limited, what a blockchain built a blockchain that's not as, doesn't have all these additional functions, all to optimize for speed on reaching consensus on the transaction ordering. So this fast finality, right? Real-time finality. What does that unlock for L2s for what's possible in the future?
Yeah. Sorry, I just lost you for a second. Could you repeat that question?
Yeah. We just talked about, optimizing, Espresso for speed, right? And reaching consensus on transaction ordering. So, this is what we mean when we talk about fast finality, real-time transaction finality. What does that unlock for L2s and just what's possible in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, transaction finality really determines the speed at which anyone can interact with the blockchain, right? And so one of the ways that, and this is particularly important for the layer two paradigm, because if you want to achieve scalability, you need to split up applications so that they're all running on their own blockchains, or what some people call, shards. And if you parallelize execution so that every application now has its own isolated execution space, then you break the ability for these applications to interact, which is how the web operates, right? Rarely does a single application just exist in a vacuum. They need to interact with each other. If you have assets, those assets need to interact with exchanges whether centralized or decentralized, right? You need to deposit things like ETH into an exchange like Coinbase or Binance. You also may need to deposit ETH into a decentralized exchange like Uniswap. And so these interactions, when they occur within a single execution environment, there's zero latency. But when they're occurring between applications that exist on different shards or different layer 2 chains, then the speed at which they can actually interact is determined by the finality time of the layer 1 consensus that is bringing finality to the layer 2s. So that's why it's super important in the layer 1, layer 2 paradigm for the layer 1 to have as fast finality as possible. And this is one of the many ways in which Ethereum was not optimized for layer 2s. Ethereum was optimized to have one and only one application shard, the EVM. The layer 2s came as a complete afterthought, and that's just one of the many ways Ethereum is completely not optimized, really insufficient to host layer 2s at scale interacting with each other. And so that's why we focus so heavily on the not only the throughput, which allows for the entire web to come on chain, but also for the latency, which allows many parallel chains to communicate with each other in real time, just like smart contracts on the same virtual machine can communicate with each other in real time.
Right. Yeah. So we have some more guests that we're going to have to get up, but I just wanted to end with one, quick questions like, what does there's a lot of chains kind of that are in integration pipeline that'll be integrating Celo, Katana, Morph, right? We've talked about these, very exciting stuff coming on sub-second finality on the roadmap. What does Espresso network look like in 2 years? Like what's your vision for what we're building and what that looks like in the future?
Right. Well, we're at a very exciting time, I think, in general in the Web3 space, where we're for the first time seeing a massive transition in real world adoption. I mean, just in the last year, stablecoin transactions, exceeded PayPal transactions by 2x, and we're doing half the volume of Visa. We're really we're really at the point where we're approaching mainstream, where crypto transactions or transactions on blockchain rails is reaching completely mainstream. We see a ton of institutions everywhere from JP Morgan and DTCC and Franklin Templeton to institutions like Sony in Japan, who are tokenizing assets and bringing real world assets on chain. I think over the next 2 years, we'll see a massive transition where basically Web 2 migrates to Web 3, and the transition, as I've used the analogy in the past, is as seamless as the transition just from HTTP to HTTPS, where blockchains become kind of this security layer underneath the internet. And we are very much about being a part of that. I think that the layer 1, layer 2 paradigm is the essential bridge to enable this to happen. There is absolutely no way that the entire internet is going to migrate to Monad or Ethereum, EVM, right? There's no way it's going to migrate all onto Tempo. There's no way it's going to migrate all onto Solana. It's going to exist by many existing applications realizing that they can run as layer 2 chains secured by a common layer 1 database. The database is something that's hidden from very much as a layer underneath web applications. And so if blockchains just become the swap-in database, then the transition becomes really, really seamless. And that's what Espresso is planning to enable. And we're not just going to do this by putting out Espresso Network and having it basically perform as well as possible as the base layer for the future of Web3, but we're also going to be doing a lot of work to facilitate institutions coming on chain, creating stablecoins or tokenized assets that have their dedicated hub chain that brings them the customization and scale that they need to operate within Web3 rails, while remaining compatible with everything that they do today.
Mm-hmm. I think the payment talk is what it enables for payment. Crypto rails enables for payments, I think, is an important topic. I think one that you can really touch on in a little bit when we get Merrick from Celo on here. And
yeah, absolutely. I would say that Merrick, Celo is is one of the leading layer 2 chains today, if not one of the most exciting ones in terms of real world adoption. It's been amazing to see, you know, their growth and uptick in adoption for real world payments. So I'm excited to have that conversation with Marek, and I'm very excited that Celo will be adopting Espresso to achieve the you know, the finality time that it needs that it doesn't quite get from Ethereum itself.
Right. Excellent. We are going to bring Benedict, who's another one of your co-founders, on the stage here. Co-founder of Espresso Systems, and there you are, and Chief Science Officer or Chief Scientist. And then also and Benedict, you're gonna have a little chat with Chuck, who's one of the staff engineers at Blockdaemon, which is one of the node operators that is securing the Espresso network now. You know, in this, earlier throughout the process during the permissioned set of validators, but also now, you know, going forward in the permissionless set. So, Benedict and Chuck, I think you guys take it away, and
thank you.
Ben and I will be back in a little bit.
Yeah. Thanks, Whit. Thanks, Ben. Hey, Chuck. I see we have a guest here also in the background.
Yeah, my little daughter is here as well. She likes to enjoy. She's sleeping, but well, here she is.
That's very, very, very cute. Yeah, I think Blockdaemon is the top validator, the top staker, or has the most stake delegated on Espresso Systems. Maybe tell me a little bit, like from the get-go, what does Blockdaemon do? Yeah, who do they operate for? You know, do you guys just work for Espresso? Is this stake on Espresso, or do you maybe have you know, you're supporting some other chains as well?
So yeah, we support like 70+ chains. Also Celo we support, which is funny, and all of the chains Ben just mentioned. Most of them we have already, and we support them. And well, we support Espresso, of course, from 2023, when it was not a network even yet. It was just like some code written by a bunch of people, and Ali, Matt, Jeb, and Brandon and Rob were like, let's start a network. And we started many of networks and fixed lots of problems and bugs. And well, slowly there we are, like it's testnet and mainnet eventually, you know, proof of stake upgrade, which is well, amazing.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit how has it been running? I mean, we're very, very grateful for sort of you know, the support along the way with all the test nets, and you know, sort of like it's been a long journey, and yeah, tell me a little bit about, you know, sort of, is there, like, what's the complexity of running a node? You know, how are the hardware resources that are required for running Espresso? Is it, you know, extremely high, or is it like actually somewhat manageable? Like, how does it compare to other systems?
So well, my team also runs Solana. So if you talk about hardware requirements, etc., that's most of the top. But no, I think from the start, Espresso was designed to be running low-end hardware, and at least from that design philosophy, then adding more resources only makes it better, right? And not make it like really hard to run and then try to throw hardware against it. I remember in the early days, I think Matt said, well, I'm running it on a Raspberry Pi. And I was actually, yeah, that's still running. So like in that sense, it's really good. Over the years, there were some like memory leaks, but they were mostly fixed. And yeah, since then it's really stable and working really well. Not much like in terms of problems, and the team is doing really well explaining when stuff should be happening and when stuff is happening, and guiding you through it, and telling when stuff is changing and what we should change as an operator. So mostly smooth sailing. And the last upgrade, well, the update of today was also smooth sailing, basically. So
yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's very interesting sort of developing a software for a decentralized network, because, you know, one of the obvious things is that every time you want to push an upgrade, you get to talk to your friends who are actually running the nodes, because you're not. And then maybe even more importantly, every time there's a bug, you need to coordinate, because like, of course, you do test nets and we do internal test nets, but like people run on all different kinds of hardwares, all kinds of different systems, and you might like see some outages from far away, and just figuring out what's going on requires a lot of communication with your validators, and I've only heard great things about Blockdaemon, and they're very responsive, but it is it's a constant action. But yeah, I think what you said is is very true in terms of design philosophy. Like we haven't interacted much, but I was very much involved in the design, sort of the core design of Espresso, and we sort of saw like kind of there's this there's different philosophies and approaches in the blockchain world. There was, so you have Ethereum that says, we will have to run on a Raspberry Pi. And then there's Solana, which says, okay, like we want these big, chunky, super expensive machines, it costs like hundreds of thousands of dollars or something like this. And we said that sort of our point was, like we definitely care about performance, and performance is the main goal. Like but does this actually need to be so expensive? And especially given what Ben said beforehand, if your nodes don't need to execute, right? If they don't need to actually, like everybody needs to execute, then this opens up a whole set of tricks. So for example, our nodes, essentially all they need to do is receive some data, and we can even do tricks about how much data they need to receive, and send out some signatures, and there's no reason why this needs to cost of course there's no reason why it needs to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to run this. So I'm glad to hear that this is also true in practice and so on. Do you guys run on your own hardware, or do you use clouds, or is this proprietary information?
No, it's not proprietary information. Generally, what we do is we run lots of things in bare metal. We can launch basically anywhere. So I think we started out with running some nodes even in Africa and that type of thing to figure out like how does latency work, right, within the network. Because in the early start, we're like, yeah, and it's nice that you want to be really fast, but how does latency come into play, right? A local network is always really fast because, well, you're close to each other. But how does that work when you're 500 milliseconds away in Australia or South of Africa, right? Is the network in a stall and that type of thing? So generally, we run most of our stuff in bare metal, but cloud is also fine for us. But bare metal has the preference since, well, the performance is mostly better, right? And latency is also low, and internet speeds are fast, mainly. So
well, I mean, I think that also, like I mean, it's really nice to hear that you run on bare metal, because if everybody runs on AWS, then they actually do have very fast connections between their own data centers, and I've seen some benchmarks of that are sort of suspiciously good, and you wonder whether did they just use sort of the AWS internal fiber, or and I think that if nodes and especially bigger validators like Blockdaemon run on bare metal, then this gives you resiliency to cases where some big Amazon region goes offline, which happened. I think I think this happened. Like I know Amazon East went off like half a year ago, and you would hope that your network then continues, and what this takes is that sort of your validator is the one that we trust, that they run on sort of permissioned, like that they run on sort of bare metal and do their own job, and sort of run things professionally and actually pay attention, which is this is go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, that's why I also see like in lots of different chains they ban Hetzner, for example, because they're less less crypto friendly. And it happened that half of a network went offline because they decided to, well, put out like the machines that were running that network. And you don't want to deal with that, right? And same with like Google or whatever, they own the infrastructure and can decide that tomorrow it's not good for their business that Espresso is running there, for example, right? So it's always good to diversify, and it's also good for having multiple parts of infrastructure around different providers and whatnot to make the network just way more resilient. And well, it's also good for the network to test on different hardware, different machines, different locations to make it as resilient as possible. For whatever reason, right? Someone can decide, well, we don't want the espresso in our systems, and then, well, it should stay alive.
Right, it should continue to operate. That's always the. I mean, I think that this is also something. So you talked about latency, right? Whether sort of the real world latency, and we've actually sort of started to do. I'm not sure if you've sort of noticed this. We've started to push some upgrades to improve the latency. I think in the beginning block time was maybe like 10 seconds, and now we're down to 2 seconds. But this is going to be actually just sort of as a preview for you, and like the world. This is our big focus over the next, maybe half a year is to do. We have a lot of like sort of upgrades kind of staged that will improve the latency massively. And one of the big innovations there is that, sort of 90% of the time, or 99% of the time, the network is actually like everything works, right? And everybody's online and everything is really well connected. And it turns out that you can take actually advantage of that to say that there's kind of a fast path where, so right now for a block to be confirmed, you need kind of 2 signatures on it, and it turns out that, you can do sort of a fast path. This is the so-called hydrangea protocol, where if you have 99% online and you have enough signatures, then you can already confirm. And then you also have a slow path. If sort of nodes go down, you still want to make progress, right? Even if 20% of your network is down. Yeah, awesome. Go ahead, Chuck.
That sounds interesting. What would your end goal be? Sub 1 second or 500 milliseconds or?
So our end goal is sub 1 second latency. And latency we actually measure. So this is, people talk about different things. So latency we measure when is the block finalized, or when is the block finalized. So it's really, it depends. Sometimes it's like right now that would be 2 blocks. So right now we're about 4 second latency, and our goal is to get to 1 second latency. So essentially a block time of half a second. And then you're really like, we're like it's a high goal, because there's like as you said, right? Like if one node is in Australia and the other one is in the US or in Europe, then that's even just the speed of light starts to play a role. But I think that we have a lot of points where we can optimize, and we're doing it sort of. We're already working on this internally, and we're doing a very iterative process. And so yeah, and the key goal will be involving really involving you guys to see also like, hey, what do you guys see on your end, and what's slow, and maybe there's some kernel settings that need to be changed in order to really squeeze the last bits out.
Yeah, then timing, NTP, time service come into play, latency across the planet is kind of come into play. Sub 1 second is doable, but then if you go to the millisecond level, it gets harder and harder.
It gets harder and harder. That's true. But we set ourselves as a goal, and I'm actually very, I'm optimistic that we can do it. But it's certainly going to require some work and some cooperation from our great validators. Okay, Chuck, any final words? Otherwise, I think we can hand it off, and yeah.
No, it's been great working with you guys, and it's really good to see Espresso move along from like just a little bit of Rust software somewhere on a node and that barely worked to like a full grown network with roll-ups everywhere and people coming in line to onboard. So well done.
It wouldn't have been possible without you. So we really appreciate this, and especially appreciate the early support in the early days, because yeah, otherwise we couldn't have tested anything and we couldn't have gotten this far. So much appreciated, Chuck.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Whit is coming back.
Hello. All right, yeah, thank you so much for that. Obviously, a permissionless network needs its node operators, incredibly important. So now we're going to move on and talk to Ben. And there's Merrick. Yeah, Ben, I'll let you do the intros. I'm just here for the transition. I'm gonna remove myself again. So you have at it.
I think you might be muted. Still can't hear you.
Ben, I think you're muted. Well, while he's figuring that out, I can just step in though. And Merrick, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to do?
Pleasure. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Do you want to do a quick intro of yourself? Obviously.
Sure. But for those that don't know me, I'm Merrick. I'm one of the founders of Celo, and more recently also Self Protocol. We started Celo now. Wow, 8 years ago, with just a real focus on enabling P2P payments globally and kind of solving the problem that is, the lack of a global Venmo that anyone in the world can use, even, non-technical, non-crypto savvy people, to send value to anyone in the world. And we've been relentlessly working for those last years, launching an L1 in 2020 that had a real focus on this, working with partners like Opera to bring about these amazing kind of consumer applications that realize this vision, and then more recently transitioning to become an L2. Which we did last year.
Right.
And so
the anniversary is coming up.
It is,
month, right?
Yeah, the 1 year anniversary. We're very excited. A lot has happened in the last year, and so it's going to be really nice to look back on that year.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Ben was ready, but he just left again. But
it's great to be here. Congrats on all the progress on your guys' side. It's a big milestone. A bunch of big milestones,
right,
for you guys. So I'm excited to be here to celebrate with you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ben, can we hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
All right.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, It's great to have you here, Merrick. I was just going to say, it's incredible what Celo has been achieving over the last few years. I've been reading on my own and have been amazed at the adoption and the level of real world payments that are happening. I would say it's almost fair to say that you're the most used. Maybe not everyone appreciates this or realizes this, but you're basically the most used L2 for real world usage.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not sure that the whole market has caught on just yet, but I think certainly our partnership with Opera and the product they've launched has resulted in just an incredible amount of activity. I think we're the most widely adopted chain for USDT in terms of number of active addresses, and then I think as you said, we're also the number one L2. Ethereum L2 when it comes to daily active users.
Yeah.
It's been humbling to see that grow. But it's still day one. I think when you focus on these less speculative use cases, then, I think you have a better moat because the network effects that you do form are very defensible. But you also, I think, need a lot more users to create the same level of transaction fees and things like that. And so we're definitely, very thrilled about where we are, but we're also not resting on our laurels. It's still early for us. I don't think we're going to stop until global Venmo is solved.
Right.
And not just that. I mean, since we started working on this, there's been many other use cases that popped up on Celo. One big one that I'll quickly plug, just because it's very timely, is on-chain FX. We have a lot of local currency stablecoins on Celo, I think more than any other L2. Mento, which is one of the protocols that launches a lot of these, just upgraded yesterday to their V3, so it's pretty exciting. And yesterday as well, a new perp DEX focused entirely on-chain FX.
Really?
Updown.xyz just launched.
Amazing.
And so we're also very excited about that space, just by virtue of it being just an ungodly large market, bigger than crypto, stocks, bonds combined. FX is just massive.
Yeah, and we're very excited to have Celo as a layer 2 on Espresso. I mean, one of the things that also I think Celo exemplifies is the fact that different blockchains can specialize in different use cases, and so Celo is very hyper focused on supporting payments and can become it is already the primary L2 where real world payments are happening, and could in the future become even more so a transactional layer for global payments. The rest of the blockchain ecosystem will still be relevant, though, because there will be other applications running on other chains that are not payment focused. And it would be wonderful if the payments that are being made on Celo can be useful in other applications that exist on other blockchains, right?
100%.
And so even just in terms of the interaction between Web 2 and Web 3, if payments are happening on Celo and somebody wants to confirm that payment in order to register something in a Web 2 application, or if a payment on Celo covers the cost of doing some kind of operation on a different blockchain, like that thing needs to happen in real time. And so that's why we're so excited to support Celo in having real-time transaction finality, which is just one of the things that it doesn't automatically get from being an L2 on Ethereum.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think, we have a very high bar for finality just by virtue of the fact that we transitioned from being an L1 to an L2. We had 1 block finality with our BFT-based consensus before, with 5-second block times. And we went from 5-second block times to on the order of 12 minutes plus whatever our batching interval is, usually like 5 or so minutes. So like on the order of 17 minutes for finality right now.
Yeah.
And that's a shame because we're excited about the Ethereum ecosystem. We believe that Ethereum ultimately is going to win. And become kind of the settlement layer for all of the internet. But, we need things like Espresso to make it more responsive.
Yeah.
And that's certainly true for finality, but, also true for interop. You mentioned there's going to be lots of other chains that are focusing on other use cases. I mean, I think even in the payments use case, it's not going to be just one chain. I mean, if you think about it, I have a lot of conviction that all of finance will move on chain. We just talked about on-chain FX. I have a conviction that FX will all move on chain. Mm-hmm. That's quadrillions of dollars of annual transaction volume that's going to hit chains. Even the most scalable blockchains, I think, will not be able to capture all of these use cases. And when you layer on these non-financial use cases as well, then I think it becomes pretty clear that there's going to be just a lot of different chains out there.
Completely, even just from a scalability reason. I mean,
100%.
having many chains is the way that we horizontally scale transaction processing, and the finality time of the blockchain is what allows for parallel execution shards to actually communicate with each other. So for applications to interact, we need fast finality. So yes, we're incredibly excited about Celo because it makes very tangible the benefit that we bring to chains that use us. And if Celo wins, then Espresso wins too. And that's the wonderful thing about being a base layer, is that all the chains that are on top of us are contributing to the excitement around Espresso as well. The more exciting things are on Celo, the more exciting things are on Espresso, just like the more exciting things are on Ethereum.
100%.
So what are you excited about for the year ahead in terms of new use cases that are coming on Celo?
Yeah, so I would say there's three major focuses for us. The first continues to be P2P payments and just maybe moving more into neobank type territory. I think MiniPay is increasingly becoming more super appy, not in terms of its complexity. I think they've done an incredible job keeping things simple enough that anybody here can refer or introduce any of their friends, even their non-crypto savvy folks, to MiniPay, and those folks will be able to use it no problem. But despite that simplicity, they're adding a lot of really cool utility in partnership with us through a really nice mini app interface that they've created. So that's a huge focus for us. I think they have 13 million users right now. I think we want to get that to hundreds of millions of users ASAP. And really just cement
in USDT. What?
So they transact in one of three assets. So MiniPay is a stablecoin only wallet. You can only custody USDT, USDC, and USDM. USDM is recently rebranded Mento stablecoin that previously was called the Celo dollar. Did a governance spin out into its own protocol called Mento, and then they rebranded it recently. So you can only custody these three assets, and that works because on Celo you can pay for gas with tokens. So you can also pay for transaction fees in these three assets, and then on top of that, MiniPay abstracts away public key derived addresses, so they only use phone numbers using a protocol by Self protocol called Self Connect that lets you map phone numbers to wallet addresses in a privacy preserving way that works across wallets. And so the end result is just a very normie friendly experience. And if you ever have the need to send money overseas, or if you have folks, especially if you have friends overseas who want to earn money in the US or Europe and want to get paid via a wire transfer or an ACH transfer, but want to receive that payment in a stable coin on their wallet, then MiniPay just has a wonderful solution for you. So I highly recommend checking it out or sending it to your friends if you have friends in that position. But yeah, I have a lot of conviction that they're going to become the next global Venmo, or the global Venmo, the first one, just by virtue of also being a public company that's behind it. Their velocity, the work that they're doing on this is just really impressive. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket, which we touched upon a little bit, is on-chain FX. A lot of volume happening there. I think we had $4.6 billion. I think it's higher. I think it was 6-point-something billion dollars last month of stablecoin volume. The majority of that was from on-chain FX, and that's primarily people trading kind of these local currencies, these like Brazilian real, Euro stablecoins, all of these. And with this perp DEX now live as of this week, I think now people can trade those things with leverage, 24/7 with instant settlement, available to anyone in the world. So very big upgrade for the overall FX market right now. And so definitely, if anybody listening here has a finance background and has ever dabbled in FX, definitely check out updown.xyz because I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
The third focus is, as with, probably any chain out there nowadays, is, helping agents do interesting things online. If you go to, I think, 8004scan.io, you'll see, I think, Celo shows up, I think, 4 times in the top 40 projects that are using the standard. And we're investing more and more into, enabling like interesting projects on Celo that are targeting, these OpenClaw agents. I think it's interesting because we have so many users with MiniPay. We have an interesting advantage in that if agents want to hire humans to do work, there's a marketplace called Mabuclaw on Celo that agents can create work that people in MiniPay can then do on their behalf. I think this is very interesting. And then typically, or once these things become big enough, then naturally you'll have bots trying to impersonate humans to try to get, easy money. And so ironically, we laughed that we can't tell if a tweet is written by a bot anymore or if a human. Ironically, these bots are going to have the same problem going forward, and they're going to want to know whether or not they're interacting with humans or bots. And that's where I think Celo has a big advantage because we have this protocol, self-protocol, on the chain, which
very interesting
lets you do ZK passport proofs to prove your humanity.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, a lot of people are saying that the payments on crypto rails weren't really designed for humans. They were actually designed for agents, and suddenly we now can realize very clearly why they're so useful. But what you're pointing out is that also the identity layer that blockchains bring, whereas ultimately that is for humans, it's actually in the world of agents and humans that becomes so important.
Totally.
For interesting.
Civil resistance is going to be like a whole new problem for bots, right?
Yeah. Very, very cool. Well, Marek, it was a pleasure to have you. I mean, we're so excited to have Celo join the Espresso ecosystem as a layer 2, using Espresso for, as you mentioned, instant settlement. The whole point of payments on blockchains is to have instant settlement, and settlement can only happen as fast as finality happens. So helping you reach faster finality is super important. And it's so incredible to see how much real world adoption Celo is getting. I would say that Celo is by far the most underappreciated chain because it's so impressive in what it has achieved. And I think that people are going to...
You should tweet that.
Yeah, I will.
No, yeah, thank you so much. And it's a real pleasure, and congrats on all of these amazing milestones. Mm-hmm. We're rooting for you guys, and we are very excited to integrate and to get down to... I heard Ben earlier said 1 second, sub 1 second finality. I mean, that's we're stoked about that coming.
Yeah, on our internal test nets, we've reached less than 500 millisecond block times, and so combined with the latest innovations and consensus that allow us to, at least in good conditions, reach consensus after only 1 round of voting, we'll be able to achieve far less than a second.
That's good.
Okay, well, I know we have more guests, so thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. All right. We are now going to bring on another familiar face. If you've been with any of our community calls or any big conferences or anything, Jill, Chief Strategy Officer and at Espresso Systems and one of the co-founders as well. and she's going to be talking with Spencer, who's business development at Apeco. Apechain being an L2 that currently is integrated with Espresso for fast finality, and a close partner on some things that we might hear a little bit about. But that's the quick intro. I'll leave it to you, Jill, and I'll remove myself now. So
awesome. Thank you, Whit. Hey, Spencer. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for joining us on this momentous day. So to reintroduce for folks who might just be joining, as of today, Espresso is running as a fully decentralized proof of stake consensus protocol. We've been in production for the last year and a half or so now, but we've been running in a permissioned environment. And of course, that can only get you so far. That's not really what we're doing here in Web3 or crypto or building the future of finance and markets. The mission is to be decentralized and therefore credibly neutral. And so that's what this upgrade that we've done today has been all about. It's been a long time coming. Token launches are kind of a dime a dozen these days. Like, since the whole meme coin mania, everyone and their brother is launching a token. It's still extremely rare to launch a new consensus protocol running proof of stake, and that's what we've pulled off. But it wouldn't have been possible without our partners, and Apechain has been a super important partner over the last year plus. Spencer, I would love if you could just introduce Apechain and maybe specifically touch upon why have a dedicated chain. Like, why not just have the NFTs living on, an L1 like Ethereum or something like that, or even Solana, et cetera? Why launch a dedicated chain?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a couple of reasons, but the biggest reason is for the metaverse and for other side. So for those not familiar with Apechain came out of what was then the Apecoin DAO. Apecoin is obviously the token that's associated with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, and Mutant Ape Yacht Club for those remember that obviously as well. And Yuga Labs, who are our close partners, have had this long-term vision for other side, going all the way back really to 2021. And it's something that really wasn't ever going to be truly possible in the way that they've envisioned it on mainnet, right? It's a very high throughput, high speed, high tech kind of gaming environment. And their vision is really to have it be kind of like the Roblox of Web3 metaverses. And that's what we're really seeing now. And so, from that perspective, having a chain where, we have ownership over the infrastructure at Apeco, where we can help kind of craft it in such a way that it's perfect, not just for NFTs, but for the metaverse, is really important for that, right? And so, you end up with this really high performant chain that's kind of at the cutting edge. That's an Arbitrum Orbit chain built on that stack, which works really well for us, that uses Apecoin as gas, that kind of ties all of that together. And so we end up with this kind of piece of opinionated block space.
I love that. And I love that phrasing, opinionated block space. I think, even for me as someone who's been in the blockchain infrastructure world for like 10 years, the first time I heard that, I was like, man, what are these new buzzwords? Like, what does this mean? But
It's a good one, right?
but I've really come to appreciate it. And I think that it's spot on. And I think what it gets at is the need for customization. And this is something that we see across all of our partners. So whether it's Celo, who's obviously focused on payments, and even within payments, like a very specific use case within payments and serving very specific markets, i.e. mostly emerging markets for Celo, ranging over to the metaverse, right? Like, these two things do not have the same infrastructure needs. They need opinionated, customized block space. And that is really what the Apechain thesis, I think, is all about. And, maybe we can still call it like the modular thesis of taking these different components, taking these different even layers of blockchains and composing them together in a way that really makes sense and is suitable for the apps that you want to support. I think another really cool thing about this architecture that obviously Espresso has been very focused on is what it does for interop. And I know Apechain has been really focused on living not just on Apechain, but across many different chains. And we'll get to Presto in just a second, but maybe Spencer, you can introduce some of the other things first that Apechain has been doing in the cross-chain universe, including Solana, et cetera. And then we can get to what Espresso is enabling.
Yeah, so it kind of comes down to this idea that we want apes and Apecoin and the community to be, everywhere, and to meet them where they are on one side, and then we want everybody to be coming ultimately to Apechain, right, to experience what we have there, whether that be other side or any of the other great things that we have, on the chain. And so over the past number of months, a lot of it started working with our friends at Layer Zero, making sure that Apecoin, which is an OFT, was kind of being continuously spread through a number of key ecosystems. So we've been on Ethereum forever, obviously. We're on Apechain, we're on Arbitrum. It was important for us to have Apecoin be accessible on both, really established chains like Binance Smart Chain, like Solana, as well as new chains like Hyper EVM and Monad. There will be one or two other chains, which you could probably guess what they are, that will be coming, there. But, as we've kind of done that, it's also ties into this sort of expansion in other side, where traditionally over the past number of years, if you wanted to own and use your own avatar within other side, that had to be an ape. And that's changed within the last few months as we've opened up the ability for lots of communities to bring in avatars. And on one side, that's avatars that are on Apechain. We have a lot of really great NFT communities that have sprung up there, be that, G's or Zards or, whatever they may be, or Night Gliders. I could go on and on. But obviously, there are a bunch of really important NFT communities that aren't on Apechain, that will never have their major collections on Apechain, although we'd love them to, obviously, as well. And so being able to have these sort of cross-chain connections makes it much easier. So, when we go and we see, Quirkies or DeGods or any of these collections bring avatars to Apechain, having those sort of cross-chain connections and interoperability is a really important part of that. And that kind of brought us to where we are with Espresso. And, I think that part of it is also having these very different ways that we operate and have partnerships with other chains, where even if we may not be bringing, Apecoin liquidity onto another chain, there's still things that we want to be able to do with them and to get their communities involved. And we've seen that with things that we've done through Espresso, be they with Rary Chain and our friends at Rarible and everything that we were able to do there. And I know we'll talk about that. Be that with Apechain, obviously we'd love to do things with, every chain that's part of that. But those have kind of been the starting points there.
Yeah, that's a great segue to some of the stuff that we've worked on together. But maybe I'll just take a step back, because I think that something I found is that it's often a bit of a leap for people to make the connection between, like, okay, Espresso is like a fast blockchain that's like being used modularly. Like, what does that have to do with interop? But at least within the L2 universe, interop really comes down to finality times. And, Ben and Merrick obviously covered this in the previous session, but, if you're looking to go across chains, then really what you're relying on is the underlying blockchain's finality time. Like, that's going to be the bottleneck. And so, if you're relying on a super resilient, robust, like Ethereum is amazing blockchain, it's amazing in many ways, but it is not fast, right? Like we're looking at 15 minutes finality time. And I was just reading the Ethereum strawman roadmap the other day, and we're looking at like 2029, I think, like 3 or 4 years from now, to make that, on the order of a few seconds. And so, what we at Espresso said was like, look, we've built this high performance, really fast blockchain that can be plugged into these L2s. You can use that for interop, and that's game changing. And I've shared this with you before, Spencer. People have probably heard me say this before, but for me, one of the experiences I've had of interop across different chains is trying to move funds from one chain to another to participate in an NFT mint. And, these things are time sensitive. I'm not the most organized person. Like I'm like trying to like flag around like money on these different L2 chains at the last second. The NFT collection mints out. I didn't have enough gas on the new chain. And then I end up with dust on the old chain. Like it's just an absolute nightmare. And this experience, not just by me, but obviously by many people who have played around in the NFT space or built in the metaverse space, et cetera, it prompted us to build something that we call Presto, right? And this was a really fun collaboration between Espresso as like an underlying infrastructure layer, and then Apechain as one flagship partner in the metaverse and NFT space, and Rarible and RariChain as another partner. And it allows for a bridgeless minting experience between the two, relying on message passing using Espresso's finality. And you mentioned already, you previewed a little bit, we're exploring bringing this to other chains. Apechain is another amazing partner of Espresso, and they have many different kind of metaverse and actually payments, like a great diversity of applications on them. But Spencer, maybe you can just talk a little bit about the significance of this kind of thing from your perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's huge, right? I think with RariChain, and that's such another great NFT chain in a lot of ways, right? Obviously, everything that it inherits from Rarible, it has really strong communities over there, and as sort of a showcase of the future, right? Where, there's a world in which we're doing avatar drops, for other side, and you're minting them in concurrence on your home chain where your community is, and Apechain at the same time. There is a world in which we're sort of expanding on the things that we've done with Apechain, where you're minting, kind of like accessories and wearables, and you're able to do that using, their tech, which sits on Apechain, but being able to have that instantly available in other side, on Apechain. And I mean, that one also, I like to joke, is even better because the chain names sound so similar. So you really won't have any idea, But
in fact, I get this a lot where I'm talking to people and I say Apechain and Apechain, and like they think that I've just misspoken. They think it's like the same thing. And I'm like, well, with espresso underneath, they are.
Right. And I think like those things are really, really valuable. I think also, like you're saying, being able to pay in the currency that you want on the chain that you want.
Totally.
That's something that's really important for us. We want everybody obviously to hold Apecoin on Apechain. That's the preference, but we know that's not going to happen, right? And at the same time, Apechain is not a heavy DeFi chain. It's not a heavy payments chain. It's not designed for that. It has a base layer of that, and it's got some great protocols around that. But people are going to want to hold their funds on the chain where they're doing most things with, but we want to be able to invite them in and be able to quickly and effectively do these things. And Presto brings us a long way to that, especially as it continues to expand through partners.
Absolutely. That is the goal. I know we're running up on time here, Spencer. Thank you again for joining us for this whole session. Spencer's actually been on in the background the whole time. Such is his enthusiasm for this proof of stake launch. We appreciate it. But Spencer, maybe I can just give you a platform for a minute to plug, kind of regardless of Espresso, to plug what's coming up for Apechain, what people should get involved in. If there's any kind of call to action that you want to share with the audience, we would love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll run through the things really quickly because there's always so much going on. I think if you are interested in NFTs, even if you have not been an NFT person before, there's so many amazing collections on Apechain, at a whole variety of different price points with really active communities. And that's one thing. And certainly, we're grateful to our partners at Rarible, OpenSea, everything like that have so many great options and opportunities. Whether you're a collector or an artist or a creator, it's the place to be from that perspective. There's also a lot of fun stuff that's happening on Apechain outside of the metaverse, Ape Church, Clutch Markets. There's a bunch of other exciting things you can check out. A lot of ApeCo's, primary activations, which are a great way to get involved with the community and start to accumulate ApeCoin as well while having fun. And then, what I'll tell everybody is really, again, go and check out the other side. I think it's one of those things where, and Jill, we've talked about this before, but apes tend to be on the cutting edge of things. And, we try to make things fun, obviously, as well. But part of making things fun is being on the cutting edge. And so we're, often early, right? And whereas I think people who've known about other side, they may think about it as it was in 2021, 2022, where the idea was there and the vision was there, but the technology was not really there yet. Now the technology is starting to really significantly get there. And you can go in, you can create your own avatars, you can create your own worlds, you can have ownership over everything. And it's just super, super exciting. And I encourage everybody to, I'll plug launch.otherside.xyz, go check it out. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Spencer. I'll say two things here just to wrap up. I have always been slightly intimidated by the NFT space. I'm not an artist. I do not have an eye for these things. And yet I have found that the ape community has been so welcoming and just such an incredibly fun, easy, accessible, cool space to get involved with and dip my toes in. So again, even if you are not an NFT person, highly recommend going and checking out some of what Spencer just mentioned. And I will close out by just giving you guys major kudos on being not only, at least from my vantage point, like very often kind of like the cool kids in the crypto space. There's just so much culture that you guys have built within the Apechain community, but also being some of the most sophisticated technologists. Like, it is no coincidence that you guys were one of the first adopters of Espresso. You went super deep on your diligence with us. And I know that you've taken that same care and attention with every decision that you've made along the way. And I think that that is just an amazing example of what this space is and should be all about, is marrying the kind of like fun, lighthearted, cultural elements of what it means to be building on chain with the, really deeply thoughtful, sophisticated kind of technology that has to underpin it. So thank you so much for joining us, Spencer. Really excited for this proof of stake milestone. And folks should go check out Presto and Other Side. And there's a lot more to come in the coming months.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thank you so much, Spencer. And thanks, Jill. All right. We are going to bring up now Aztec, who is the co-founder of LitVM. Nice to see your face. We've been on X Spaces together. We've been in plenty of Telegram chats, but I've actually never seen you face to face. So it's nice to actually see a person when I'm talking to them.
Definitely. That's one of the best parts of Web3 is meeting people in person, or at least seeing them on cam. First of all, Whit, I have to say, as someone that lives and breathes blockchain, crypto, kudos to you guys. Espresso has been crushing it. I've read some of your recent papers. I've seen now, you're celebrating your milestone today, going to proof of stake. So congratulations. I love the airdrop. I think you guys are just awesome. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And likewise, I mean, we're very excited about what you're doing. So, I mean, LitVM is actually the first rollup to use Espresso that's not specifically an Ethereum rollup, right? The fact that you're actually have these settlement bridges to Litecoin as well is incredibly interesting, and diversifies the types of L2s that are joining us. And so we weren't, even though a lot of people associate us with Ethereum because layer 2s are associated with Ethereum, people need to realize that layer 2s are an independent paradigm, and layer 2s can have bridges to any chain, including Litecoin. And so it's really exciting to see you pioneer that, and to be also I think the first layer 2 using Espresso that leverages the finality of Espresso to have multiple asset bridges to other chains.
100%. We roll up to both Ethereum and Litecoin. And I think it's really exciting to be part of this futuristic idea of the unified world ledger, and to be part of that because, with the way that Ethereum is and Litecoin is with not as fast finality, it's so awesome to be working with you guys, to basically achieve that goal. So awesome.
Absolutely. Do you I mean, and one of obviously the benefit of having these kind of multi settlement bridges to these layer ones, these settlement layers, Ethereum, Litecoin. What was the tell us a bit about just the genesis of LitVM. Like what is the goal with bridging to both these layer ones and having both ETH and LTC like in one execution environment for your users?
Definitely. So this really comes down to the why Litecoin, and I get it all the time. We're going through a raise where we're talking to all kinds of partners and we're building out the ecosystem. So I have to explain this a lot. Really, I've been a part of Web3, since before Ethereum, but I saw Ethereum come online. I've seen the, DeFi summer. I was actually part of kicking it off on Polygon. We actually incubated Polygon back in the day, incubated QuickSwap. I've seen, NFTs come. I've seen a lot of the innovations in interoperability. More recently, Bitcoin, runes and ordinals. And so what I noticed is that the industry kind of lost its way a bit, from like the founding principles and cypherpunk kind of start. And so holistically looking at the industry and some of the things that the industry has done to kind of hurt its image, with the rest of the world, I thought that the best way to take our industry from where it's at today into the next level would be to return to founding principles, the cypherpunk movement, but to marry that with all of the innovation in Web3. And so we're taking, short story is we're taking Litecoin. We did a ton of research. We started with Bitcoin, of course. We looked at many other legacy assets in cypherpunk, hard money, freedom money assets. And after all of our research, we came back to Litecoin as the #1 legacy asset. So we're essentially taking Litecoin, which has that whole cypherpunk movement, and marrying it with the innovation. And that's part of working with you guys as well, because, with this modular stack that we're building, fast finality is so important. And we're enabling Litecoin to have the ability to join Web3, have yield, programmability. You can have Litecoin-backed real-world assets. You can have Litecoin now join the agentic movement as well. So that makes it easier to, to use Litecoin. And so it's essentially a massive unlock for Litecoin. And with Litecoin being, in our opinion, the most undervalued and strongest legacy asset, and that we see a lot of institutions and that institutional money that's going to flow into Litecoin, where we think it's very important to essentially unlock this demand or this utility for Litecoin. So that's essentially the short story, kind of a bit about how this all came about and why we started with this asset and why we're unlocking it.
Yeah. Ben, I know you have to run a few minutes, but if so now, did you have any other questions or topics you want to get into with Aztec? I mean, I have a few other things I could ask him, but I just know that you have a hard stop.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love to understand maybe some of the future vision for LitVM. Obviously, you're focused on bringing a more performant, faster transactional layer to Litecoin, the asset. But I was wondering if you have ambitions beyond that, and what being a rollup that actually has this trustless asset bridge to Litecoin enables you to do, maybe that's unique and differentiated. Would love to hear some more.
Definitely. So unlocking it by way of our ZK technology so that you can use native Litecoin in Web3 instead of needing to trust, let's say, like some type of vault, where you get like a wrapped version of Litecoin. Or if you wanted to get yield, trusting a centralized exchange to gain yield, the first unlock is just enabling users or institutions, the DATs, the funds, the indexes, to basically build strategies that can gain yield for this asset. So, there's billions of dollars that are Litecoin, and it's mainly used for payments. It's used just as much as Bitcoin on some payment applications. It's very competitive with stable coins. So essentially just unlocking it, giving it utility is the first step. But if we're looking more futuristically, we think that when you unlock it and give it the ability to participate in Web3, you'll also be able to add more utility to Litecoin so that it will have, cross-chain type strategies and enable it to have more functions. So that's also a big part of why we're working with you guys to have that fast finality, so that in the future with the unified world ledger, it's not just Litecoin on LitVM with yield, real world assets, and AI, but that Litecoin can be the heart of the entire unified world ledger.
Very, very cool. I have to jump, but it's been such a pleasure to have you here as a guest, and I'll let the two of you continue for the last few minutes that we have. And I'm so incredibly excited to have LitVM join the Espresso ecosystem as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Ben. Appreciate you inviting us. Hope you have a good one.
Thank you very much, Ben. Aztec, I mean, I one of the things Ben referenced it, but LitVM, is be the first L2 that is leveraging Espresso for finality while maintaining kind of bridges to multiple L1s, right? Ethereum and Litecoin. And I think what this provides is it really validates our thesis about being agnostic to stack, settlement layer, like VM. It's really Espresso is designed to be compatible and agnostic to all this stuff, right? And so that's what I'm excited about, especially from a marketing perspective, right? Like it gives us a good opportunity to really tell that story, and I think an opportunity to really address what I think is a conflation of ideas within the space around kind of L2 architecture, and like specifically this idea of like finality and settlement. And so because L2s just obviously were designed on Ethereum, like the idea of like finality and settlement are like two distinct functions, but because
Exactly.
L2s use Ethereum for finality and also maintain the bridge to Ethereum, the fact that they're bundled kind of has conflated the ideas of finality and settlement, and people assume that they mean the same thing when they're actually different. So separating these two functions is possible. And so LitVM is going to use Espresso, right, for fast kind of secure transaction finality, secured by what's now the proof of stake consensus protocol, but while maintaining the trustless bridge to both Ethereum and then another one to Litecoin, right? And so this really represents a shift in how we think about L2 architecture and in the multi-chain world that we are currently living in, and just will obviously continue to grow. So that's from my perspective and a marketing perspective is really exciting to be able to talk about that.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. I mean, we're right at the beginning of that unified world ledger. You guys wrote a paper on this recently, and it's really funny because I wrote a paper also that's going through peer review that is very similar. It talks about the unified world ledger. I'm using different words, but I'm now stealing your guys's terminology because it's such a great way of saying it. And we're right at the beginning of all of these chains, all of these different shards, or however you want to explain it, interoperating, working together. And this is what was promised to us in the beginning. Right. We all thought that Web3 would not be so clunky and work together. We didn't think that we were going to just essentially create the same problems that we have in TradFi, and so it's awesome to see you guys essentially enabling all of us around the Web3 space to have that unified world ledger, work together, build strategies together because of your fast finality and other technology that you guys have.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to reading the paper when you have it published. Please send the link.
Definitely.
And one other thing I did want to bring up, and this is still obviously nothing's been finalized or anything like that. And you referenced the getting back to the cipher punk principles of the entire crypto space, and one of those obviously is decentralization is central to some of those ideas, right? And Espresso has the mission has always been the same, right? It's to solve for the fragmentation originally within the Ethereum ecosystem, but in crypto in general, right? Blockchains can't communicate, therefore they're silos, fragmentation, right, of liquidity and users. Originally, we the team was thinking that the best way to address that was through a shared sequencer, right? And having all these L2s put their transactions into a shared sequencer that would then sequence them together before the block is published to say Ethereum. But the product market fit wasn't quite there because L2s it turns out most don't want to give up their sequencer, right? Which is there's a sovereignty issue there. There's obviously revenue that would be lost, but the Espresso network, while it's not offering shared sequencing at the moment, like multiple like all the L2s that are currently integrated, they're not they're not using Espresso as a sequencer, right? They have maintained their existing sequencer and are just submitting blocks, which are then finalized. But the Espresso network can be used as a decentralized sequencer, and so no existing L2s are using the Espresso network in that way. But in conversations, I learned that LitVM is potentially interested in exploring that, right? And so decentralizing its sequencing. So not trying to lock you into anything, but I was just curious about your thoughts there on decentralized, further decentralizing LitVM in potentially in the future.
Definitely. We want to adopt that technology, and the way I look at decentralization is that it's a spectrum. You have extremely decentralized solutions and then less decentralized. And so over time, the goal, because we do believe in the cypherpunk movement of decentralization, privacy, and creating code, um, the the idea is to become more decentralized over time. And so working with allies like you guys that will enable us to have fast finality or become more decentralized over time, because the whole sequencer issue is definitely a hot topic in the L2 space.
Yeah.
We would love to do that. Obviously devil's in the details, but the goal would always be to work with the most cracked dev teams like you guys to essentially help us with our modular stack become more decentralized over time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, and obviously that's why today is such a big milestone for the Espresso network, right? Because the same, further towards decentralization, and today, with the upgrade to permissionless proof of stake, that's it's no longer operating by a permissioned set of validators that were handpicked by the original Espresso systems team, right? This is now anyone can now stake ESP and operate a node and participate in consensus and operating the Espresso network. So we're on the same page there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Aztec, I really appreciate you coming on. I think that as Ben said, I'm super excited as well to continue working with you and the LitVM team and getting the chain integrated and continuing to tell that story. So really appreciate you joining us and commemorating the proof of stake upgrade on Espresso network. So
thank you.
Thank you.
It's an honor to be here. So and celebrate with you guys. So thank you for inviting me.
And I think that's pretty much what we had planned. Just to kind of reinforce the significance of what we're celebrating, right? Like the Espresso network at block 11,040,000, marked the start of the next epoch, and that is the stake table is now fully in operation, and staking rewards are accruing. And it is now, Espresso is now decentralized and running a permissionless proof of stake. And this was referenced a few times during the call, but I think Jill especially had mentioned it. But launching blockchains, is not a super rare occurrence these days. It's almost to the point where anyone can launch a blockchain. But what is actually very unique is launching a blockchain that's running a custom consensus protocol. And that is what we have done. And so Espresso is run by a consensus protocol called Hotshot, based on Hot Stuff, which is an existing consensus protocol, but and custom designed specifically for what we've been talking about, reaching consensus as quickly as possible on L2 blocks, reaching consensus on transaction ordering and data availability. And it's designed to be fast. And and as we said, Espresso is a non-executing blockchain, right? You can't launch a token or deploy a smart contract on Espresso. And so it's, you can count on one hand the number of new consensus protocols or new layer ones that are running new consensus protocols on one hand in the last few years. I mean, Monad, Aptos, are a couple that come to mind, but it's rare. So we're very excited about that. And I just want to thank all the partners that we had on today, all the node operators that are running nodes that are operating the network. you know, this is only really the beginning. We have lots on the roadmap. You know, as we mentioned earlier, sub-second finality is in our sights. We have it down to 2 seconds on an internal DevNet. And you know, we have a clear path to get to sub-second latency, which you know, this real-time finality for L2s, which is really going to unlock a whole new design space when it comes to developers building cross-chain apps, like native apps that can be you know, fully cross-chain. So we're talking, you know, cross-chain, you know, order books, you know, think like Hyperliquid, but fully cross-chain. Meaning, you know, can open positions from multiple networks. And then also the integrations that we are looking forward to this, you know, coming up. Celo, you know, Merrick was on earlier talking about Celo and everything that it's doing. They're going to be huge. And other ones are Katana and Morph, Gate Layer, LitVM, as we just learned from Aztec. So lots going on in 2026. We're very excited, and we really are looking forward to continuing to build and contribute to the Espresso network. So check us out. EspressoSYS.com is the website. Espresso SYS on X as well for Espresso Systems. I'm Cryptomachia on X, and I'm glad you're taking notes, Crypto Cobra. Hopefully they come in handy. And Espresso Foundation is espresso.foundation, and Espresso FNDN on X. Espresso Foundation being the kind of long-term steward of the Espresso network. It was the organization that launched the token a few weeks ago, ESP, and also is, you know, the one you know, really pushing them and managed the upgrade to proof of stake. So with that, I will wrap this up. Thank you so much, everyone. I see that we just passed actually 1,000 viewers, so that is exciting. But that is it. So everyone have a great day. Jespresso.